So the other side of the Rudy Gobert trade, now everyone is just assuming that Donovan Mitchell is next up for the Utah Jazz to get rid of. Listen, people are drawing comparisons to the current situation in Utah because of the fact that they have Danny Ainge partly in charge there in Utah. They're just drawing the conclusion that since Danny Ainge traded Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, that since he's traded Rudy Gobert now, he's going to trade Donovan Mitchell. Look, the two situations between Utah now and Boston 10 years ago are nowhere close to being the same. Both of the guys that Danny Ainge traded from Boston, Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, were completely out of their prime, past their prime, and were huge salary cap figures that did not make sense to the team and were very non-team friendly. This is nowhere near the case with Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell right now, as it stands, is a guy who is in his prime, is a guy who pretty much has had to carry the load for this offense for, the last 4 years that he's been on the team. Utah has been a playoff team ever since Donovan Mitchell got there. He's been a 20-plus point per game scorer, and he's been the closest thing to Dwayne Wade since D. Wade retired. I don't understand the just fascination with trades right now that just because Rudy Gobert, who is the most overvalued player in the NBA right now by Minnesota apparently, that just because he got traded, that means Donovan Mitchell is on the way out as well. Donovan Mitchell shot 35% from three. He's been a consistent 38 to 36% shooter from outside, 44% from the field goal. Look, he's been the only guy on the team other than Jordan Clarkson who takes shots. And now that he's on a team where now there's a defensive-minded point guard with Patrick Beverley, there's other shooters on the team now like Malik Beasley, like Bojan Bogdanovic, and now there's a guy in Jared Vanderbilt who provides a much better spacing for this team than Rudy Gobert ever was close to providing. And Donovan Mitchell is only 25. Donovan Mitchell is a three-time All-Star, is a guy we've considered many times an All-NBA guy. It just doesn't make sense to trade Donovan Mitchell right now when you have a chance to completely rebuild this roster around him. And if you don't think he could be the guy to lead your team to the playoffs this year, that makes it all the better. Because you already have an all-star that you can compete with, or you have an all-star who you can build around. And with 4 future unprotected picks from Minnesota, and the first one being next year, there's a really good chance that if Minnesota bottoms out with this Rudy Gobert trade, which I really think they do, there's a really good chance that Utah ends up with a top 10 pick next year, regardless of how they play. It just doesn't make sense to trade Donovan Mitchell. Just because Danny Ainge traded Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, that does not mean he's trading Donovan Mitchell just because he traded Rudy Gobert. I get it, what other people are saying. They traded Royce O'Neal, who's a good friend of Donovan Mitchell. They let Eric Pascal go, who I guess is a good friend of Donovan Mitchell. But if you're looking at this from a Donovan Mitchell perspective, I think he probably realizes Royce O'Neal and Eric Pascal are two guys who are expendable to this roster. And you can find another Royce O'Neal. You can find another Eric Pascal. What you won't be able to do is find another Donovan Mitchell, who, like I said, has been compared to Dwayne Wade and is probably the closest thing to D. Wade that we've seen since Wade retired. Look, all Utah's doing is taking their problem and giving him to another team. That's exactly what they did with Rudy Gobert. Donovan Mitchell hasn't been the problem for Utah. He's had one series where we question his defensive ability. And this is something I said yesterday in a video. Who has not had one series in their career where we question them, both either offensively or defensively? Every single star player in the NBA right now has had a question after a series. And just because we're asking questions about Donovan Mitchell now does not mean that he cannot be the best player on a championship level team. We just haven't seen him on a championship level team yet. He's been on teams that have been restricted by the fact that they've had Rudy Gobert there already. And now that Rudy Gobert is gone, it's a roadblock that is no longer in the way. It's a transition. It's a transition for this team more than it is a rebuild. And I see this team really competing in the West still. They're not going to be a top 3 seed, probably, but they're going to be a team that's not even going to be in the play-in tournament, in my opinion. If Donovan Mitchell is the guy that I think he is, then that a lot of people think he is, this is not going to be one of those bottom-feeding teams that's just competing for the number 1 overall pick. I don't think that's how this team is operating and is looking at this situation. I could be completely wrong, and Donovan Mitchell could get traded 20 minutes after this goes up. But I just don't see the same comparisons that other people see because it's not the same situation. And look, Utah has a really unique opportunity right here to say that, we're going to give the keys to the guy that we actually believe in, to the guy who we didn't start competing well until he got here, and we really didn't change our outlook on the franchise until we got this guy here. We have to remember Donovan Mitchell was the 13th overall pick, and he has shocked everybody with how well that pick has turned out. I am not going to just trade him after 1 year of some subpar play on the defensive side of the ball when the entire team from top down completely fell apart. I can't place that on Donovan Mitchell. I can place it on Rudy Gobert when he talks all this shit about it's either me or Donovan Mitchell that needs to be traded. And now that Rudy is gone, this opens up so many doors for the Utah Jazz and for Donovan Mitchell to take that next step and be a Western Conference contender.